There we go.
Okay.
Slow down, you move too fast. Gotta make the morning last. Kicking down cobblestones. Looking for fun and feeling groovy. Ba da 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 dum, feeling groovy.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the bridge. We've got a great guest today, Steve Grubb. We're going to get Steve's story going pretty soon. Um, but today you are on the bridge, and this is our 91st episode. So, Steve, you're number 91.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, Sandy, do you have a quote for us?
Sure do. This is by Viktor E. Frankl, and he tells us today when we are no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves.
Mhm.
There's so many circumstances in our lives that we end up having to look at ourselves and say, okay, so how can I grow out of this situation? What can I do going forward?
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. I like Viktor Frankl. So, Steve, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Well, Sandy, I appreciate you sharing that quote from Viktor Frankl. If I remember correctly, he was writing that having, experienced kind of the most awful situations imaginable of the concentration camps in World War II, and how profound that is. Just touches my heart. That even in those circumstances, the a man with the wisdom of and we change ourselves, we change our perspectives, and we change the world. Uh,
Mhm.
that's
Exactly.
something.
That's
That's
the
a
only thing we can control.
Yeah, it's the only thing we can. And I remember, I think part of his story was he kind of kept etchings, kept track of the days, and it helped him. He somehow scratched it on the floor or something, and that helped him, keep track of it. So, the little things mean a lot, even though you think you want to make big wide sweeps. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about you and your where you're at, and we'll go from there.
Well, right now I serve the community, the families, the students in the Highline Public Schools, which is just immediately south of Seattle. We have about 17,000 students. And uh, I've been in Highline a little over uh, 25 years. And then
Wow.
prior to that was as a school administrator, and prior to that, I was a teacher. But I started in the North Shore School District as a paraeducator, and so I like to say I've done I started on the playground. I rolled up my sleeves and was a teacher for a number of years, and then an elementary principal, and then I've been in the central office, and now I'm the associate superintendent in Highline, kind of covering operations. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about my professional background and story there. So a lot of leadership experience, really informed by working with students, working in schools, and working with teachers and other administrators.
Yeah, that ground experience that you had in the playground really qualifies you to be an excellent leader and administrator because unless you've been there, you don't understand it.
Right.
We sometimes see people, in high level leadership positions, maybe with backgrounds in finance or business, the military, and I respect that. I'm sure that is a very legitimate pathway. But when I've watched in other industries, other areas. I think the Boeing Corporation. When I've talked, and I know nothing about aerospace, but like we all do in the Northwest, we have a neighbor who works for Boeing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And when I talk to those neighbors, especially those who have been engineers, they always talk about how the Boeing company started it primarily as engineering company, and the leadership and the CEOs for a lot of years were drawn from the engineering ranks, and they knew They knew the business of building airplanes. And, I know that, a few decades ago, I think of it as kind of the finance people. There were some changes in the industry and leadership shifted away from engineering to business and finance. And again, good people, I'm not criticizing that. But as we all know, Boeing kind of lost its way.
Yeah.
And, we're all the price for that in Washington State. And so I do believe that when you deeply know your industry, those that you serve, and the problems that they face, it's much easier to both maybe inspire and lead, and also truly understand the problems that are facing folks on the front lines.
We talk so much about culture, and school, even though we're in a culture of a community, school has its own culture, and then also timing, being in a schedule at a school is so different than other industries. It's interesting because it's helpful to have a little ground knowledge, and then you can connect with your teachers and your kids and your parents in a different way, not necessarily better. And I know a little bit about engineers. I've worked with a few, and their brain is wired different than some of us. I don't know, at least differently than mine. I don't think in numbers and boxes. I think more outside the box, and I'm a verbal processor, and that annoys a lot of people. So, there's advantages, but there's advantages of other people too. Yeah.
I think in a key piece of that, Sue, and I agree with you in understanding schools and the culture of schools, and that is the premium that is placed on internal coherence. I think schools may certainly more than I think for-profit businesses and maybe even other industries other than maybe healthcare. They really the lubricant within a school and a school district that gets things done is that social coherence, and schools will go to great lengths to maintain that. And just as in life, some of our greatest strengths are then our Achilles heel. That social coherence can then also sometimes be, I think, the number one impediment to innovation and change. And the savvy leader is able to understand how social coherence works within a particular school or even a school district, and find ways to challenge that coherence just enough to make the improvement or to make the change, but not so it undermines and the system rubber band snaps back to
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy, talk a little bit about your school culture when you and I first started working with each other, because you had a pretty challenging group.
Right. They did not believe that I, as in my position, they did not think that I was their supervisor. And so we had to kind of share the fact that, yes, because we worked with PSESD, and they would come into our program and be there as advisors to the program. And the staff thought that they were the ones that were actually their direct line, and it wasn't. And they had to learn that, no, this is the lineup, and that I was their direct supervisor. And so there was some real learning that had to go on around there, and there was a lot of communication skills that needed to be learned. Sue really helped us bring our program around to a very healthy work environment where people loved coming to work. They knew that I had been a teacher, so we did early childhood education. So they knew, I think that they respect somebody who comes up through the ranks, because they know that they have been there, done that. So that it gives us more validity when we're actually doing training with our staff and sharing with them. And we actually had, I would say, we had our time of Camelot where it just everything came together because we had all of those pieces aligned, and it made a huge difference in how we served our community and served our families and the kids in our classrooms. It really it ended up, you could feel a difference. It just felt right. It just flowed, where before it did not. And
Well, and Steve, we started out with good old roll and goal. And I know that, when you and I worked together, we always started out with what's the role and what's the goal. And that clarity was very helpful in schools and not something that we learned in principal school. At least I
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
Well, I think
And
such
it was everybody being accountable for their part of the pie. In other words, it was one of those things we could shift it off, and people came together and supported each other and helped work as a complete system and a complete program, which was beautiful because it wasn't competitive. It was like, how can we help each other be the best that we could be? Because, as Sue said, the roles and goals, what are we wanting to be able to accomplish in the lives of the people we serve? And yeah, it was a beautiful time when we got it going on the right path.
So, Steve, one thing I remember about you in, observing you in some of your schools, and with the staffs that you worked with, is that you have always been a good listener. And that's something that not, I wish everybody was that way, that they really gave presence and really heard what people said, because then you can, you may have to give them bad news, but at least you're listening. So, talk to me about your experiences with being present and listening to your groups.
well, different roles and jobs afford different kinds of uh, ways of showing up and ways of being, even just concretely ways of like uh, furnishing an office. And for a lot of years, as a principal, I had the desk and maybe some chairs or maybe a small table people could gather around.
Mhm.
In the last several years in the roles that I've been in, I've rearranged. I got rid of the desk. Uh, got uh, uh, a couple of soft chairs, sofas, relaxed spaces without barriers between the people that I meet with and myself. And initially, I was saying that I think now I'm paid to talk to people,
Mhm.
and it's kind of what I do. And uh, in the last maybe 18 months or so, I've shifted that because in fact, I don't think I get paid to talk to people. I think I actually get paid to listen to people.
You do. Yeah, you do. Well, and it
And
has a
I
far more
think there's
profound.
just
Yeah.
so much gets done by slowing things down long enough to listen.
Oops, we lost your audio. You hear us? Steve, can you hear us? We lost Sandy. Can you talk, Sandy?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, you can
Can you
hear
hear
me?
me, Steve?
Steve, can you
Are
hear
we
us?
back?
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the basic human needs, and I don't care if somebody is 2 or 102, is to be seen and heard. And so if you're a good listener and you're really present with them, it makes all the difference. You don't have to be right, but if you see and hear them, the encounter is different than it would have been. Whoops, we lost your video this time, Steve.
Well, Sue, I think it comes back down to relationship. Over and over again, when I came on board, I took the time
Maybe
to.
the audio will be better without the video.
Okay. Okay. You want to make a comment about being seen and heard and the way that you're listening? Oop.
Anyway, as I was saying, Sue, I took the time to know individually. I spent time and made appointments with each one of my staff individually so that I built a relationship with them. And then, if there was something that we needed to address that for improvement, it seemed a lot easier
Sure, sure.
because we were already pre-connected. They knew I cared about them. Uh, so when there was issues that arose,
I
we
don't
were
know
able
if
to work
we
through
have,
it.
oh, maybe he's here. There. We were going to get him this time. Steve, can you hear us? Nope, I'm not sure. Well,
I can hear you, but
oh,
I think my connection's very unstable.
okay. Do you want to pop off and try to come back on, or do you want to just, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can, but I think the connection's bad.
Okay. Why don't you log out and log back in and see if that works?
I'll do so.
Okay. So, Sandy, the the listening is so very important, that being seen and heard.
Right, right.
And the one thing that I want to bring up with Steve when he comes back is how often we use Maslow's hierarchy. And
Mhm.
as he was talking about how he sets up his room for
Right,
talking to people rather than barriers of the desk,
right.
that's a piece of safety
Well,
that,
and there's a difference between talking at people and talking to people.
there he is. We found
Hi.
you. We were just talking about the value of listening. And I was mentioning how it sounds like your new room setup without a desk has really created, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, and the first place is safety. So that the people feel more comfortable and safe rather than, oh my God, I'm in the superintendent's office, I'm in trouble. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that's improved your communications with people.
Sometimes I think it's just the culmination of lots of little things.
Hmm.
The arrangement of the office just says so much about it sets the stage
Hmm.
for the conversation and for the listening. I know not everyone is a coffee drinker, but there are a lot of coffee drinkers in Seattle, and just having a water bottle or offering a cup of coffee, again, it sets the stage in a different kind of way.
Hmm.
And so I think there's just so much that can be done. And then a lot of skills I learned from you, Sue. The using of open-ended questions. uh, uh, I, I kind of stepped away from being rigidly agended in my meetings. I think now of my meetings as kind of it's a exploration. My job is to explore and find the conversation that
Hmm.
needs to be had.
Hmm.
Right.
That's great.
And more often than not, uh, people will offer that conversation, and it is an offering. It's a gift
Hmm.
that people can only share voluntarily. It
Yeah.
can't be commanded, expected, demanded. None of that works.
No, no.
But uh, uh, to be able to find the right conversation, and sometimes those are difficult conversations. I have you know people making career decisions, in the office about what their hopes are, what their values are, and it can come down to what matters for the timeline is someone's commitment to
Right.
adult child who's in college.
Yeah.
Uh, that's what's really driving the timeline, not anything else,
Yeah.
right? And we think that it's someone's uh, that it has to do with things that are all work related,
Right.
and just oftentimes it's very human
Hmm.
motivations, values, and drives that
Sure.
are at the core of so much decision making.
Right. And your conversation helps them, your open ended question helps them to become aware of maybe what the issue is that they didn't know before. And
And they might not realize what other options might have existed, and
sure.
then we can together engage in exploring the issue and problem solving and coming up with uh, a decision that at the beginning of the meeting didn't exist in my mind and probably exist in their mind.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you were, that makes it real. It's a real conversation. It isn't just an agenda driven one. And
Right.
I'm sure you've had to have probably quite a few difficult conversations in your life, in your role.
Well, and that's often the work. I think it's the Center for Creative Leadership that talks about leadership of self, leadership of others, leadership of systems,
Mm.
and that nested, seemingly very very simple leadership paradigm I find just so profound. And
Yeah.
often when sometimes my to diagnose when leadership has gone wrong, and uh, 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 so many times, and maybe I'll just even use when I make mistakes and when I'm in
Mhm.
not being my best self. Uh, Often it's attributable to issues around self mastery, self leadership.
Right.
And so when you peel that onion and realize that we can often support our leaders and ourselves by focusing on self,
Yeah.
and that goes against the kind of the general ethos in public education because we're such helpers.
Yeah.
We come into the system to assist and grow and either help our students or help our teachers or help our fellow administrators. Uh, but we also have to, and it's trite, but it's so true. You
Yeah.
start with self.
Well, it really is. I'm going to say the opposite of trite because if we are not self aware, then we're not learning anything. you know and as we teach teachers to be metacognitive in their classrooms, they need to learn to be metacognitive, put on that hat on themselves, because that's the only way we grow. But it is in an inverted triangle. We get it
Yeah,
done the opposite way
yeah.
until we either burn out or get sick or something happens because we haven't supported ourselves.
Right. And one of the things that I remember when we were trying to change the culture of our program, one of the things that Sue told me, I remember when we were setting guidelines and outlining what how we were going to go forward and did a handbook for the staff and that kind of thing and what communication was going to look like, healthy communication and the expectations and that kind of thing. She said, Sandy, something, if you hold people accountable and it's not something they feel comfortable with, they will leave. And that means that this isn't the best place for them, that there's another place for them to be able to use their strengths somewhere else. And boy, that was true. You could watch it happen. And so one of the things that's important is that if you are that you hold people accountable for what expectations are for your district or for your schools or individually. It makes a difference in having a fine running team, a fine tuned team, because the people that are there are because they want to be there.
Mhm. Yeah.
So true, Sandy. And going back to that, um, schools, I think, sometimes um, uh, develop systems that are effective at really avoiding accountability.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
It's related to that social cohesion insight, and I think effective leaders find ways to hold themselves and I don't like the phrase the verb hold, but create the conditions for accountability,
Mhm.
Right,
uh,
right.
right? Such that uh, uh, I think it kind of begins with each individual holding themselves
Yeah,
100% accountable.
yeah.
Um,
That first
and what
percent.
I've seen is that as leaders model that and do that for themselves, it spreads like wildfire.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
'Cause people
Yeah.
like to be in accountable systems.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to flow down from the top, right?
The
Do
truth is
do
clean.
as I do and not what I say. Because if you're only using words and you're not being an example, it's worthless. So,
Right. Yeah, the truth is clean. And if I can learn how to tell the truth in love, it's hard, but it really is necessary. Because, and I want to go back to we worked with a lot of adult bullying in and out of my career. And if you start holding that bully accountable for their behavior, whether or not it's rolling their eyes in a meeting or grading papers rather than paying attention, just find a way to create a norm so that everybody has to follow the rules.
Yeah.
The rest of the staff is going, finally somebody approached that elephant in the room, and if that bully decides to go somewhere else because they're not happy, that's fine. But you have created a different culture, a truth telling culture, a place where it's okay to softly hold people accountable. You don't have to use a hammer. And it's wonderful to watch that magic happen.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
well, actually, it gives clarity to the people within the system, and clarity to the person that may not be fitting well into the culture that you are creating, and they may be happier somewhere else.
Yeah.
Helps them
Yeah.
understand what is not working or what is working for them.
So, Steve, I'm going to kind of uh, go on to not really a different subject, but a different category. Can you give me your two or three favorite leadership skills?
Mm. Um, I think, there's so many phases and stages, of leadership. And I think the answer to that question, it's important to situate kind of um, uh, uh, the context for the leadership. But in where I'm at now, one of the things I share with folks is there's often a tension between clarity and ambiguity, and
Mm-hmm.
and people they love clarity, and I like to say people like clarity until they have it.
Right, right. That's true.
So one of my, I think I probably, it's a corollary from some work we did together, Sue, a long time ago. But in fact, I was in a meeting the other day and someone said, well, it's like Steve always says, let's not ask for clarity until we actually want that clarity.
That's a good
So I
one.
think
That's a good quote.
there is, I think, something that I notice as leaders mature is that
Mhm.
they mature and develop is, people get promoted for the very thing that will be their undoing at the next level. So the
Yeah.
hardworking teacher who prepares their own lesson plans and gets all of the science equipment set up and the experiments prepared and stays till 8 o'clock at night getting the bulletin board lovely, you know uh, gets promoted to an assistant principal, and all of a sudden they're working 16-hour days as they continue to try to be the star individual performer, rather than realizing that, boy, at that level, their job is to get work done through other people, to create the
Right.
conditions to inspire and motivate others to do
Yeah.
that type of
Right.
individual
Totally.
performance, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Once you become an administrator, your teachers are your
Right.
students, and it's really hard to make that transition in your head.
And I think
Um,
at kind of senior leadership levels, uh, I think that you know, early career folks, at least I had in my early career the sense that, wow, at the highest levels of leadership, there must be such crystal clear clarity around the vision and the mission of the organization. And when you do end up in kind of these senior roles, I think we realize what we're actually having to navigate is incredible ambiguity,
Yes,
and that we have
absolutely.
to, create, use the
Yep.
symbolic frame of leadership to create uh, uh, the symbols of clarity, the strategic
To make,
plans, the mission statements, I got a poster on
yeah,
my wall that, imagine it's just so clear. But the reality is that
no,
at the highest levels of leadership, it is, just a ton of competing interests,
yep,
competing, it's the political frame that takes over. And
yeah.
it's anything but crystal clear.
Well, and then it might be crystal clear to me, but it's probably not crystal clear to you. The meaning. I remember one of my mentors at UPS when I was getting my master's. She said one of the most important leadership traits is the tolerance of
Yeah,
ambiguity. And there are people down at the teacher level that can't tolerate that. They're not ready for the the weight of being able to hold two things at once, two or three thoughts at
and
once.
I think that would be my number one, kind of that tolerance of ambiguity. The number two, though, would be its cousin, and it might appear to be the opposite, and that is centered on absolute values.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed in this time in which our political space is really being challenged by competing values. I've been part of leadership groups that have kind of really debated, in the interest of political expediency, should we
Hmm.
compromise or adjust our values, and just maybe we'll just, we won't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll talk about some other language, because this would be more pleasing and accommodating to those who are in power. And my noticing has been that it is actually those organizations and those individuals who have doubled down on the certainty of their values that
Hmm.
are surviving this difficult period, and not just surviving, but thriving. I think about
Right.
the board at Costco has been kind of unique. Target really, said, "Hey, we're gonna." We were they were about diversity, equity, and inclusion post George Floyd, and then as soon as it was politically expedient, they stepped away from that, and so many of their
Right.
customers just walked away from that.
Right.
They're in trouble. Costco has doubled down on diversity, equity, and inclusion as core values of that organization, and as we know, they continue to thrive.
Well, it reminds me of the Bible verse that talks about shifting sand. If you don't have solid
Yeah,
ground, then nobody knows where they are, and you certainly can't lob on to those important
that's
educational
right.
values.
Well, and when I think about the current environment and the attack on truth, I can see with my own eyes a videotape from Minneapolis. I can
Hmm.
see for myself. I don't need someone to tell me what I am seeing. But we're in an
No.
environment right now in which other people are telling people
Hmm.
what is true and
Yeah.
what is not true. And people are believing it, even in defiance of what they can see with their own eyes. And so
Hmm.
truth itself is under assault.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I think that back to your Bible metaphor of the shifting sands versus the solid foundation. The solid
Hmm.
foundation begins with the ability, and public education, folks, the ability to discern truth for oneself, the ability to think for oneself. And when
Hmm.
something can be true or false, then something can be right or wrong. But when
Yeah.
we erode truth itself,
Mhm.
all of a sudden we don't even know what's right and what's wrong. And we
Right.
become unanchored from our values as
Mhm.
individuals, values as organizations, and
Mhm.
I think our greatest fear are values as a nation.
Leadership suffers because people are attracted to that stability, whether they want to know it or not. It's, and they know they can count on it, and it's powerful. And I remember it was probably 20 years ago when people were warning us about the internet, and I don't know that we called it social media back then, but of not being able to, how do we teach our kids discernment? you know and I love the old picture. I haven't even thought of this for years, of how they train people to notice counterfeit money. And it isn't to look at the counterfeit money, it's to look at the real
Oh,
stuff.
what a great metaphor.
I remember that from years ago. I don't know if you guys do,
Yeah.
but it's a good one. You look at the real thing, and people with values are the real
Yeah.
thing, and it's going to attract people, even if the sand is shifting.
I
So
think that coupled the ability to tolerate ambiguity, to perceive and understand multiple points of view, to hold seemingly paradoxical ideas in one's mind, the ability to do that, and the ability to be grounded in a set of in an understand in an epistemology of truth, and
mhm.
and a set of values that can flow from that. I
Yeah,
think
good.
that's what we need. I
I
was
like
reading, I think, is a Brene Brown book, Standing Ground, maybe, something to that effect. It's one of the newer ones, but she talks about developmental milestones, not just for kids and little kids. I remember that big one when the kid crosses midline. It's like, oh my gosh, the baby is growing, but that there are developmental milestones even in midlife. And
sure.
she was suggesting that ability to embrace paradox rather than push it away and look for simple either or answers might be a
Yeah.
midlife developmental milestone.
I think it does take
It,
time. It's often before, after the mid
yeah,
30s. They say that there's a developmental place then. Well, and the other thing that I think, I don't hear you saying, but I know that it's true for you, but being able to hear somebody and really listen without judging them. I mean, I don't have to agree with you to have a
that's right.
conversation. And that's maturity. It really is. It takes some values to do that, and it takes some, I'm honoring you as a person, that I'm really going to hear you, and maybe I don't have to get my agenda in. That might not be the point of our conversation. It might just be to hear you,
Yep.
um, and feeling that space. So that's good. That's good. I like those are good. So what what are you what are you going to leave as your legacy?
I love that.
That's
Love
a
that
big
question.
question.
Yeah.
That's a big question. Yeah.
Um, you know, um, uh, uh, again, there are multiple ways of answering that depending on the frame. Because and the role, the role as a father, as a husband, as a employee. Um, I would say from one some things that really converge for me, kind of, and I think of myself as kind of in the late career phase. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in Highline, we have been working unashamedly to around the diversification of our workforce. We have a real
Mm-hmm.
belief that in a district in which um, uh, over 80% of our students identify as students of color, that
Mm-hmm.
our workforce, uh, uh, the ability for us to deliver on our promise will be enhanced by a workforce that is
Mm-hmm.
increasingly representative of that student population, and in which
Mm-hmm.
the multiple kinds of lived experiences, and that can be racial and ethnic identity, but it can be many uh,
Sure.
identities, sexual orientation, lived experiences around international, living internationally, linguistic diversity,
Mhm.
diversity around gender, around ability and
Mhm.
disability, how we think about that. Um, but those enriched lived experiences that students can then relate to can have a teacher that
Mhm.
says, uh, you know, uh, let's move away from the times when maybe an African American student had one African American teacher in their entire school experience, to maybe, you know, every class that I have, at the high school level, I have
Mhm.
role models who have a vast array of lived experiences, many of which I can relate to as a student. That's why
Mhm.
the diversification is this is not about political correctness. This is about
Mhm.
our ability to deliver on our promise in Highline Public
Mhm.
Schools to know students by name, strength, and need, and equip them
Mhm.
to for the future they choose, prepare them for the future,
Mhm.
and a legacy. We're seeing those diversification ratios and numbers over a period of over a decade
Mhm.
really increase. We're
Mhm.
approaching, when you look at all of our employees, really close to 50% of our
Mhm.
workforce reflecting that diversity of our students. Um, and I feel like we have kind of a flywheel that is turning,
Mhm.
that is where recruitment practices are generating uh, that kind of possibility. We like to say that retention is the new recruitment, and the
Mhm.
ability to retain a
Yeah.
diverse, high quality workforce. That's our challenge right now.
Mhm.
And but again, as the culture, going back to the very beginning of this podcast, as the
Mhm.
culture changes and is one that which everyone feels welcome, valued, and
Mhm.
safe, uh,
Mhm.
then we're going to create a space in Highline in which I believe our
Mhm.
students are going to thrive. And
Mhm.
if I have some small uh, role to play in that
Mhm.
process, that's a legacy that I'll be proud of.
That's cool. And as you say, the students will thrive. The staff will also thrive. You know what I mean? They'll learn and they'll thrive. So one last question before we debrief. Um, if I am a teacher who I've been in the classroom for 10 years and I want to make the transition to the assistant principal, what is one piece of sage advice that Mr. Grubb will give me?
Well, uh, 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 my piece of advice would be everyone has a person in their lives who probably knows the individual knows you well enough to know your strengths, but also your vulnerabilities, and might even know your vulnerabilities better than you yourself. I do have a younger brother.
Ah, yes. His
And
younger
I
brother.
think my piece of advice would be to go to that person. It might be a spouse, or a partner, a friend. I do find siblings are absolutely go-to people for this
Yeah.
piece of
They
advice,
tell
and
you the
just
truth.
tell me my vulnerabilities, and don't hold back,
Yeah.
because someone told me if you don't tell me in a way that I can hear, the staff is going to figure it out within the first three staff meetings and reveal it publicly.
That's right. Yep. Or walk out. They'll walk out of the meeting or something. Absolutely. They see the right.
Those vulnerabilities, they will emerge,
Yeah.
and you can either learn about them through those people in our lives that love us and have our best interests at heart, or the hard way. But it will happen. So my advice is have those conversations. I do find, depending on people's preferences, that conversation is going to be a long one, and it may be enhanced by a glass of wine or a martini.
Yeah. At least you and your brother don't wrestle it out anymore, huh?
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah, that's really good advice, and it goes back to the self-awareness, being self-aware. So, Steve, our last round that we do is what's one takeaway? So you get to start, then Sandy, and I'll close. What's your one takeaway from our conversation today?
Well, Sandy, I'm walking away with the reminder and the gentle nudge around the Viktor Frankl quote about our perception is what we can control, and even in the darkest of circumstances. And let's face it, these are tough times right now.
Yeah,
our perspective we can control.
Okay, I like that. Sandy, how about you? What are you taking away?
I'm taking away that education is a moving target, that good education is something you just have to keep tweaking as you go to have it the best for the students that you're working for, the families that you are supporting in the growth of their children. And yeah, it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah, I'm taking away a great reuniting to talk to you, Steve. It's great to talk to you again. And a reminder that the three of us in this room, we're all learners. We're all curious learners. And the hope and prayer that we stay that way. It'll keep us healthy and keep us moving forward. So thanks again, Steve. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Steve. Nice meeting you.
And I'm going to push stop, and then I want you to hang on until it stops so we can debrief. Okay? Thanks.